Well, Charles, New York has flooded twice in the past week, but the mayor is more concerned with exercising international policing powers that he doesn't possess. How are you tonight?
I'm doing very well, Jason. Thanks for asking. Hope you're well. Yeah, I mean, it's almost to the point where I might start pretending that I'm from, I don't know, Latvia or something over here. I mean, to explain the goings on, the hijinks and low jinks of what's going on in Manhattan and New York City and New York State with this bonehead mayor and the collection of overpaid boneheads who are pretending to work with and for him, and Kathy Hochul and these other blue state people. I mean, they are literally insane, these people. I mean, it's not, they go, all these young people on the left appear to start from the premise that poverty is widespread. There's no social safety net in the United States of America. Government spending is threadbare. When in the city of New York, this moron sits on top of a budget of $126 billion for 8 million people. What the fuck are they doing with the money? Right? And that's the expense budget, right? That I don't think that includes capital expenditures. I mean, it's just preposterous that a bunch of wet behind the ears morons would believe that they have a mandate to eliminate the capital system, and go down a path outlined in that Democratic Socialists of America platform, as if that's something that people really voted for. And this is before you get into the questions of, was the primary, and then was the general election in New York City for mayor, was it rigged? Were these elections rigged? We had Trump gave a speech, I guess it was last week, right? And the mainstream media has barely covered it. The statistic that really jumped off the board to me was that in just principally a handful of Republican states that complied with the request to supply the voter rolls, analyzing that handful, maybe 17 out of 50 or something, you came back with the conclusion that in Republican states, where you would hope they check, there were 278,000 illegal votes cast. Then comes, the predictor, the reaction, this, some lady responsible for this in New Jersey, laughed about it. So this is crazy. Trump doesn't know what he's talking about. Now, in the last 12 hours, I think what's happened is that initially the governor, who's Republican, who's Democrat, who actually had an illegal alien living in his house and was encouraging people to participate who were legal, that guy had tried to emphasize the fact that there were 6,000 and change illegal people voting in whatever the election was, and blamed that on a software glitch. Well, the company, John Solomon, reached out to the company, and the company said, that was not a software glitch. The state directed us to do this, and the real number is 34,000, not 6. And I'm sure by the time we get into it, it's going to be millions and millions of people voted illegally in the last election. And then you've got to go back to 2020. On the face of it, only somebody who never got past second grade math would believe that 2020 was a fair election, right? Joe Biden, a potato head, barely sentient wisp of a lunatic, got a lot more votes than the most popular Democrat candidate ever, Barack Obama. And then somehow magically in 2024, Kamala got far fewer votes than Biden did in a population that was growing. It's just preposterous crap. And all of these pundits, go around and say, oh, no, Trump has lost his mind. John Thune doesn't, our Republican senator from South Dakota and Senate Majority Leader, he doesn't want to pass the Save America Act, which is supposed to protect elections. What is it with these people? How much dirt do crooked donors and government actors have on the political class and the punditry? I think it's a lot. We're being sold a bill that somebody actually had a pretty funny thing, and I haven't checked it, that Olive Garden was having a difficulty with the all-you-can-eat pasta and salad buffets. So they put in eater ID requirements that are more strict than voter ID requirements in Olive Garden, right? And all you're talking
Eater
about there is,
ID. What?
all you're talking about. Well, you had people coming in and paying cash or pretending to pay cash, and then wolfing down 10 pounds of pasta and sneaking out the back door. So you wanted to have,
Never-ending pasta pass.
yeah,
Oh.
you're talking about, stealing pasta is not good, but stealing an election, particularly using, illegal, it should be straightforward. And
This
yet
is
you
up
have,
there with the people putting the Red Lobster shrimp salad in their purses. They closed Red Lobster, Charles. I meant to tell you that. The Red Lobster in Times Square closed.
yeah, I went to Red Lobster once outside Poughkeepsie, and I have to say the food was pretty good, but it was very expensive. I mean, it was much more than, lobster should be more expensive than a Big Mac, but
Well, I
it was
think
quite
that's it.
expensive.
It's not really any less expensive than like any seafood restaurant, and it's not necessarily, I mean, permanently closed, Charles. Red Lobster, Times Square.
Damn it. I was coming back
I
just to
never
have
went
food there.
there. They did have a giant fish tank, though. I mean, again, I don't really care, except that it's just a sign of the times that basically everything is closing.
Right. But you go back and you think about Ma'am Dumpster Fire. And remember, Barack Obama decided to come into some nursery school with the
Yeah.
Mamdani, and jointly read out, I don't know what, Heather Has Two Mommies or some crazy book to little kids. Um, his program of Xanadu for free, unicorns in the streets. Uh, I read that rents are 40% higher already. And I don't know how that statistic was calculated, but certainly the subways and buses are not free. He's not going to arrest Bibi Netanyahu. What the hell is this kid doing?
Yeah, the one thing I will say, he's media savvy, right? I don't know if you had a chance to see this video that he put out. I don't want to show it on YouTube because who the hell knows what they might strike on YouTube. But we'll have a look at it on the sponsor exclusive segment right after this on crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com and subscribestar.com and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. I just want to point out a few things to you, but this was like a proxy fatwa that he put out there. And I got to tell you something, Charles. I get a sense that when Netanyahu comes to New York, just the fact that Mamdani did all this, there seems to be a really heightened risk of someone attempting to do something to him.
Yeah, and again, you don't have a right. I mean, people who come into our country, or any country, illegally, I would argue have no rights. But maybe that's too strong. And certainly, there was a case, I believe, of I think he might have been an active service member who got in the wrong lane in San Diego and ended up in Mexico, and unfortunately, he had a gun in his glove compartment. I think he spent several years in jail.
There's an even worse story. When I was living in California, there was a guy who got into a car accident in Mexico. And if you don't have Mexican auto insurance, it's against the law to get into a car accident. And he was like in need of emergency medical attention. And they took him to jail and the guy died.
Is that bad?
It's bad. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I don't know if you saw this testimony by the moron who's president of the American Bar Association. You see that with that Congressman Gill?
Maybe I did. Where we're asking her if being objective is important. She's like, well,
yeah, or is the American Bar Association nonpartisan? Oh yes, we're nonpartisan. We and then every major hard left thing that you could possibly advocate for is something that the American Bar Association advocates for. Of course, the American Bar Association is not nonpartisan. It's a hard left arm of the democratic machine.
You know, I had a tweet earlier today, Charles. Maybe you already know this, and I knew it too, but I just was looking something up and was hit by this, Jacobs v. Sherrod thing from 1978, where I'm just asking, do people realize that a U.S. District Court judge can deliberately do harm to an individual and you literally have no recourse because the legal definition of the absolute judicial immunity that judges have is that anything that they do in their judicial capacity, judges and their judicial officers have always been awarded absolute immunity for their judicial acts. Absolute immunity covers even conduct which is corrupt, malicious, or intended to do injury. So judges, I didn't realize, and their judicial officers, this covers that Richard Lurie, even if he did forge the documents on behalf of George and his brother, even if it was intended to injure me, I have no recourse. Can you
How can that
believe
be
that?
right?
It's what I'm saying. It's because this was decided by judges and Congress and everybody's, hooting and hollering about idiots like Zohran Mamdani giving speeches about what they want to do to people that they can't even do, that nobody even understands. See, the issue with Mamdani, I want people to understand this. I'm not defending, I don't speak for you, Charles, obviously. I'm not defending Benjamin Netanyahu. I'm not condemning Benjamin Netanyahu. I'm not taking any position on Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel, or anything other than the mayor of New York City concerning himself with the laws of an international body that has no jurisdiction in the United States of America. I mean, this is if he went and selected a law that he likes from Uganda and was trying to figure out if he could impose that on someone. And people who are backing Mamdani on this need to understand what would happen to them if the International Criminal Court was granted authority over the United States. And you know what else occurred to me, Charles? Thankfully, Mamdani cannot run for president, but if we get another genius like AOC, he could become Secretary of State. And then the speech that he gave today would carry weight, and he might be able to get the federal government to accept the authority of the International Criminal Court. He's a young guy. That's a very real and dangerous prospect.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, remember, these people like Mamdani and others who are older, even perhaps your age, have been through an educational system that doesn't believe in nation states, doesn't believe that the United States is a force for good, doesn't believe the United States played a role in abolishing slavery globally. Don't believe any of that. They believe that the world needs to be remade in the image of these punks who can't balance a checkbook and are nonetheless making, in Mamdani's case, $278,000 a year, whatever he's making. That's on his base salary, and who knows what grift he also gets on the side. So they're on a project. I remember back in 1968 and 69, with the riots and the assassinations and all that, and the Vietnam War was in full throttle. That in springtime came around with Earth Day and all that. There was class on the grass. Let's emulate what's going on in Colombia. I was in New York City then. Let's remake the world in our for the benefit of youth. You can't trust anyone over 30. Remember all that nonsense? And today we are gleefully led by people who really are ignorant and dangerously stupid. I mean, you go back to Obama. Thankfully, people are finally on both sides of the aisle going back over the period January 20th, 2009 to January 20th, 2017. I mean, to go take speaking fees and collect Nobel Peace Prizes, but meanwhile, to be the sitting president of the United States after an election has decisively voted for that Donald J. Trump would be president-elect. In that period, to abuse the system, and after Trump was inaugurated, to lead an active resistance that resulted in Trump being arrested, his family being debanked, ultimately assassination attempts, and pretend that this cipher of an individual about whom we know nothing about his true academic performance, absolutely nothing. We've never seen transcripts. We've never seen applications for the. We don't know who paid for his law school. We don't know what he was doing for 5 years after he graduated Columbia, and there are all sorts of mysteries. The man controls with allies a non-for-profit Death Star in Chicago is valued at about $1 billion. He's got multiple mansions where, from time to time, chefs die, in between preparing the appetizer and the main course. And the Middle East is a wreck because of him. Our relations with Europe are a wreck because of him. And the man is, there's reports that he just bought another mansion in London. And the punditry class still swoons over Obama. And he has in many speeches. I remember the famous quote, you don't bring a knife to a gunfight, was something he said at a political rally. He also said, we're now days away from remaking America, fundamentally transforming America. Well, who elected you to do that?
Actually, Charles, it was your buddy who coined that don't bring a knife to a gunfight.
Yeah, Sean. Well, I know it was from that movie, but he was echoing what Sean said.
Untouchables. That was a great movie.
That was. He was a great actor and a nice man in person. But, it's just, you look at this mess. America today, I mean, honestly, I don't just fault Ma'am Dumpster Fire. I mean, the world is on fire now. We have, our closest relationship with the UK. We have an incoming new prime minister who's a complete butthead and is appointed absolutely clueless people already to key positions in their cabinet. He's on a soak the rich plan that has never worked anywhere in the world and certainly has never worked in the UK. He wants to revisit privatizations and go back perhaps to the 1970s when I think in 1980, I believe the 80% of British GDP was controlled by the government.
Look at what the New York Times says about Burnham. He promises hope and change. These guys have one, they've got one playbook and they just keep playing the same tune.
Hope and chump change. Again, if you believe in this day and age, I mean, when I think about what life was like for me on, I believe it was June 9th, 1980, when I reported for work at Dillon Reed as a wet behind the ears 24-year-old with no computer, no internet, in a time where you had a local carrier, a national TV carrier, telephone carrier, international calls were phenomenally expensive. Then I think what we're doing here now, casually, this is our 2000th podcast,
something like that.
And you've done many more than that, alone and with others. When I think what you can do, and the amount of information that you can access for free, I mean, for low cost, and then process yourself and see the conclusions that we reached early on. I mean, there's a story recently that the Customs and Border Patrol were prepared to subject Peter Daszak of EcoHealth to really strict investigation and scrutiny as he came back from Qatar in, I think it was 2017. Oh, I forget when it was, actually. We'll have to look at that. But when he came, no, it was 2020, 21.
Yeah, 21, I think.
Yeah, just as Joe Biden pretended to be president. And the New York office of the FBI said, fuck that, you can't do that. Well, we did a series of very in-depth broadcasts, in studio, and then we walked to the headquarters of EcoHealth and walked around talking about this. We did all that work in, I think, by May of 2020. And what's happened with EcoHealth? Who's been disciplined for that?
Nothing. And
So
also, nobody's reporting on this, Charles. This is posted on Rand Paul's website, but it's not like, New York Times has nothing to say about this.
Yeah, and you look, I mean, again, you know, I time I think is the most precious commodity, but I thank I don't know who for the extra time that I have now that I don't have to read newspapers or watch legacy TV or read books written by people like Jen Psaki and Latrine Jean Pierre or whatever her name was. I mean, what goes on in mainstream coverage of politics is pure theater. And when I have this, I've been reading this book. I took a pause on it yesterday because I was busy, but by Amy Chozick, who is she's an okay writer. I'd say she's a C plus writer, in my view. Fully prepared to talk about intimate personal details that most people wouldn't discuss. I guess that's titillating and that sells books. But she provides an insider account of the 2007-8 attempt to install Hillary as president, and then the follow-up dud in 2015 and 16. And it's crystal clear that the Clinton camp understands that they control access to a celebrity. And they also understand that if you're working at the New York Times and you're a rising writer, you have to have access to that celebrity to write a story. Otherwise, they'll publish a story and then the Clinton camp will say, this didn't happen, that didn't happen. And, the paper never approached the candidate. This is fiction and fantasy. And, so if you want to be on the right side of the Clintons, particularly at a time where the entire world was breathlessly expecting there to be the first female president, and husband and wife team gets back to the White House. The storylines write themselves. So it's a story about how she pissed off the Clintons and didn't get access to the candidate, and she's actually, I think, still on the shit list with the Clintons.
Did you
Nonetheless, she
catch
gets a
this
book deal.
detail here, Charles? She began her career at the Wall Street Journal, and she wrote a profile of Stormy Daniels in 2012.
Well, she actually began her career, according to her in her book, as an unpaid intern at Condé Nast. And before that, I think she was possibly writing in Texas for a regional, a small town newspaper. So she began her mainstream career, you're right, at the Wall Street Journal, where she was, I think she was hired to cover stuff in Tokyo or in Japan first. But anyway,
But Stormy Daniels,
yeah, I know.
that's suspicious to me.
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of shit they do. And remember, the insiders at the Times, they're mostly they're couples. And I had it, I'm not going to say who, but a famous New York Times person explained to me that in New York City, that is, in New York State and Washington, D.C., the New York Times has incredible access because many of their staffers are also, stuck into the Attorney General's bureaucracy, stuck into the FBI bureaucracy, stuck into the U.S. Attorney's offices. And while they shouldn't be pillow talking, they do. And so they conclude New York Times reported, oh, this is about to happen. Remember, when we were meeting with Shelby Halliday of the Wall Street Journal in 2018, I think it was, she would begin, first of all, she would always insist on meeting me in Starbucks. Occasionally you and I met her at the Wall Street Journal, but she'd say, no, why don't you come over to Starbucks? And I'll meet you there. And I always think, well, why can't I just, the tea is free at the Wall Street Journal. Why would I? But, okay. But then she would begin the conversation. Has the FBI contacted?
I know. That was just like, she is
Why?
an idiot.
No, she just has a big, she's still there and she just has a big story about the war in Iran, I think.
I don't like her at all.
I know, but I'm saying this ability of a handful of insiders to decide what books get pushed, what Twitter accounts get visibility, what story gets played out. And then, you see in John Solomon, he knows what's coming from, ahead of the pack. He's in there now, working with Trump and he's actually, I think, so far doing good work, but will he really get to the heart of the issue? I mean, the heart of the issue was that 2020 was not the first election that was stolen.
Certainly not.
Just wasn't.
Now, Charles,
Yep.
we're going to take a break right here and head over to the First Amendment Forum. I hope people will join us on crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com and subscribestar.com and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Also, people who follow me on X at JG_CSTT will get the sponsor exclusive video right after the show. Thanks for watching, everybody. Stay with us. We'll be right